Hey y'all, and welcome to episode 5. They were never meant to stay. This is a story about leaving the garden as the next step. There's moments in life where growth makes it impossible to return to who you were before. It's not that something's been lost in a negative sense. It's just that things have changed in a way that can't be reversed. You can see this really clearly in human development. A child can move from innocence into awareness. But once that awareness is there, it doesn't go away. Life becomes more complex, more personal, and more real as we each find our own path. That's the moment this story is describing. This isn't a story about exile. It's a story about transition. After the moment at the tree, the text says their eyes are opened and they become aware of themselves. That is the turning point. While what follows isn't immediate punishment, it's a shift in how life is experienced. They recognize their vulnerability and they cover themselves. It's the first expression of individual awareness that we see. They're not experiencing themselves as part of a unified whole any longer. Now they see themselves as separate. And that changes everything. And when God speaks to them, it's often read as confrontation or judgment. But the language can also be understood as clarification. Questions are asked, not because God needs information, but because awareness is being drawn out of them. The human is now participating in understanding what's changed. The description that follows the event involve work and pain and difficulty. They're usually labeled as punishment. But when you look closely, they read more like descriptions of reality after awareness has emerged. Life becomes more demanding. Effort is required. Responsibility isn't optional anymore. The ground doesn't simply provide, it has to be worked. Birth isn't passive anymore. It carries intensity and strain. And relationships become infinitely more complex because individuals now experience themselves as distinct from one another. These aren't arbitrary penalties. They're the natural conditions of living with awareness in a world that is no longer experienced as unified. Then comes the moment of leaving the garden. And this is where interpretation matters the most. The common reading frames this as exile, as if humanity is being cast out for failure. But when you follow the progression of the story, it reads more like a necessary movement forward. They've changed. They can't return to the same state of unawareness. The text says the access to the tree of life is now guarded. That's quite often read as restriction. And it can also be understood as protection. Remaining in full awareness while trying to hold on to untested innocence would create an unbalanced contradiction. So the story moves them forward instead. The garden isn't destroyed, it's just no longer where they belong. The idea of exile isn't as explicit in the original language as it's often presented. The movement out of the garden follows the internal change that's already taken place. The guarding of the tree of life suggests the issue isn't punishment, but preservation. The human condition has shifted, and the environment that once matched that condition doesn't fit who they've become. When you understand this as transition instead of exile, the story becomes consistent with everything that came before it. Humanity isn't being rejected. Humanity is moving forward, following the path that God laid. Awareness leads to responsibility, and responsibility leads to participation in shaping the world. This isn't a fall away from purpose, it's intentional movement into it. You know, the garden can be understood as a beginning, not an ending. It serves its purpose, but it was never meant to be permanent. Leaving the garden wasn't punishment. It was the next necessary step in becoming fully human. And this matters because it removes that foundation of shame that's been attached to the story for generations. And it replaces it with a framework of growth, of development and forward movement. It also aligns with lived experience. Growth is uncomfortable, and it introduces a lot of complexity. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means something is changing. They didn't leave because they failed. They left because they changed. And once that change happened, going back was never an option. So the only direction left was forward. One love, y'all.